Awesome. So, everyone, my name is Benjamin Lannon. So, I've how long have we known each other? Like decent amount of time so far, I would say, right?
I think we're coming up on. I mean, at least more than half a year, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. They've been like I think I was introduced to you through Chris Biscardio, who is a fellow community member, but and actually he's spoken before. But yeah, so been on a while, and I was like, it's lovely that you're able to kind of reach out to the community outside of and be able to really give talks about from a lot of people out covering very different topics. So tonight I wanted to basically do a talk about kind of getting people up to speed with GitHub Actions. So if people want to follow along, I'm gonna drop the link in chat there, and you can just follow along with the slides there. So I'm gonna flip there. People should see my slides now. So talk is called Getting Up to Speed with GitHub Actions. So when you may have heard, like if you've been in the field, you may have heard about GitHub Actions and like just through talking with other people, maybe you've been on GitHub and you saw that like actions tab, but you've never really dug in and figure out, okay, how do you actually go in and use this tool? So first, someone I ask, what is GitHub Actions? And we could say, it's CI and CD on GitHub. You know, thanks for coming and talk. You know, that's not actually the case. It is CI and CD, but on top of that, it's a platform that you can actually push and trigger code based upon things like Git commits, pull requests, issues, comments, if you want to do it on a schedule, and about 20 more events. So really think about really the entire spectrum of opportunities and things that you have on GitHub. So maybe you're working with somewhere and it has a maybe you are adding a page into the GitHub wiki. Maybe you are adding something onto a one of those Kanban boards. Like any of these opportunities are places that we can actually add code and add automations around to kind of expose and kind of enhance the workflows that we do on GitHub. So none of those things I was talking about works for you. The nice thing about it is we also have webhooks. So we can actually also, if none of those work for you, you can actually expose an endpoint, an API that you plug in and you can trigger from absolutely any application. It's just an HTTP post request and it'll trigger your workflow. So with that, the platform is called GitHub Actions, but I've also been talking about this word workflows as well. And I think it's something that's good to clarify like early on. So when you start out, um, a GitHub Actions workflow is basically a suite of jobs that will run various commands or steps upon that certain specific trigger. So like if I do a pull request, if I open a pull request, I'll run some tasks. If I make a new comment in an issue, that'll run some tasks. If I do any of these things, it will run a workflow. This is the full task. While an action more so is a self-contained program where you pull in that you can add into workflows, but they're self-contained things. So it's just like a single task. Maybe it is installing Node onto the environment that you're working with. Maybe it is cloning down the repository so you can you can see the code. It's basically these are just kind of your building blocks for GitHub Actions workflows. And with this, they can be so at the moment right now, you can either write them as plain Node.js files or as a Docker container. So you can throw anything you want into a Docker container as well and run it as in a kind of self-contained action. So you may ask, what tools do I have for this? Do I have to use? So with these, you have full VM access to any of the various operating systems. If you want to use Windows, if you want to use Mac, if you want to use Linux, if you want to use all three, when a certain thing happens, you're able to do that. And with that, you're able to install whatever you want. So if you want to come in and install Chrome, and then you want to install Chrome and do some stuff with like Puppeteer, or you want to like take some screenshots, everything is open for you. You have full access to these machines. And with these machines, you have each of them have a 2-core CPU, 7 gigs RAM, and 14 gigs of a solid state. So you have a lot to work with. This isn't just a tiny VM that you may get for like $5 a month, but it's a very powerful kind of machine that you have access to. And the nice thing about it is maybe you are working with this and you want even more powerful machines. You want like an actual full-on server. You can actually take the software that they're running up on GitHub Actions and bring it down to maybe a VM you own or a server you own and run it using a self-hosted runner. So you have the ability to either use their hosted services or run it partially on your machine. So with this, let's go on and start with CI. So as I said, like it is just so GitHub Actions does a whole lot of things, but this is a workflow I think that covers a lot of people. Like when people start using things like Travis or use something like Circle CI, normal CI providers, this is kind of what you are expected to go in. So you start with saying, you kind of give each of them a name. You say what I want to do this on. So I'm going to do this when a pull request is triggered. So you say this is the trigger that we put in this field on, and it will say run this on a pull request. So with that, now we can come in and say, okay, let's run some jobs, and we're going to run this first job that's called tests. It's going to run on Ubuntu, so we're going to spin up an Ubuntu VM, and we're going to do a couple things. So the things that you expect to run is you're going to check out the branch that you're working with. So maybe if someone pulled a branch in, if someone like made a fork of your repository, they made some changes and pushed PR back up, this would check out that branch that they did. And now maybe you want to set up like Node.js. So we come in and there's this other action that we can also use, and it is called action setup node. This has a parameter. So think of it like kind of like a function. We have a function and it has some parameters. So we're gonna have it tell it node version 12, and this is gonna install Node.js 12 for us. So then we can have a version of Node.js to be able to use in our environments. And then you do what you expect to do. You can come in and run npm install, and then npm test. When you go and run this, it will come through and it will it will come through. It will say, hey, what jobs do I need to run? It sees the test job. It'll spin up this VM. It'll go through step by step. And if any of these fail, it will fail the entire thing. And then you can go into logs at a later point and see, hey, this failed because of maybe a test failed, or maybe it didn't install the node modules correctly. It will allow you to have that access, so you can have a safety net when someone pushes a PR, they don't get stuck. So with that, we kind of have now 3 layers now. So instead of just the actions and the workflows, we kind of have 3 layers. And I think this is a good kind of metaphor for kind of describing it. So your workflow, the highest layer, you could think of it like we're making a picnic. And down layer, we have all of our jobs. These are like chunks of the thing. So maybe we're gonna have sandwiches. And then in each job, we'll have many steps. Maybe the one step is bread, or maybe another step is like the peanut butter, or maybe turkey, or whatever you want in that case. This kind of allows you to split up things from these various layers. So if we start with like if you think of it as a whole piece, that is the whole job, the whole workflow. You go down a layer, you have a job, and then each job has multiple steps. And the nice thing about this is if we wanted to say, not just run this with Node 12, but maybe also run it on Node.js 10 or Node.js 13, like we can add additional jobs that can all run in parallel to do it on these particular like these different versions. So that's kind of the layering of how I think it's a good way to think of like how we can go from the biggest kind of area of GitHub Actions to like kind of the smallest. So now some people may ask, what do we want with like what can we like what are things we can do with GitHub Actions? And specifically what kind of actions are available? So maybe you want to have some notification services to integrate with your thing. So maybe if a PR comes through and it fails, maybe you want to send that message to Discord or Slack. You want to tell someone it's failing. Maybe you want to do some stuff with some IoT devices. For instance, I have a action that we'll actually see a little bit later on, that I'm going to describe a little bit later on, that whenever I build a site and push it out, it will be able to take that site and like it will be able to notify me. So for instance, I have a Wi-Fi enabled light behind me. I can actually change that to be like either green or red depending on if it succeeded or failed. Yep, and I was just looking in, let's see. I'm just gonna read through the chat if there's anything I'm missing.
You know I got you, Ben. I'm not gonna let you slip on the questions. I'll bubble them up. You know it.
Oh, come on now. Yep. So on top of that, we also have other things. So like maybe you want to do some screenshots or perf testing. So you want to maybe run like maybe you have your site and you test it with Lighthouse. Maybe you want to automate that Lighthouse testing, or maybe you want to take some screenshots of your site. You want to do Puppeteer because you want to make sure that's someone doesn't take, for instance, your Reactadelphia assets and changes the orange and purple to be just black. You don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen. So, and plenty more. So really anything that you can kind of think of to add various different portions into our workflow, whether it be like, I've been going around with like talking about these things that you can do on a pull request, but you can do on any of these things. Like maybe if someone makes like you could have a feature where maybe when a pull request is merged, it will add a comment saying, hey, we're ready to deploy a version into staging. Would you like us to continue? And then you can maybe reply back saying yes, and it will go do that deploy for you. So really, as long as you are able to write it, and if it works locally on your own machine, it will be also work up in the cloud for GitHub Actions. Now, maybe you are a little bit, you're like, okay, yeah, Ben, like, yeah, a basic one, of course it'll work. It's basic. Show me something a little bit more in detail. So this is actually a GitHub Action workflow I have for my actual sites. So here we have a workflow called build on push. So what that does is I will wait for any git push, and when this comes through specifically on the master branch, so you can actually add like filters on here through this syntax. I will come in and I want to run this build job. I come in, I set up some environment variables. So I'm going to set up some tokens that will be used later, which lifex token and lifex bulb ID. This is the Wi-Fi enabled lights I was talking about earlier. I set up some environment variables. I say, let's run it on Ubuntu again. So I do a checkout. I install dependencies with Yarn. And then I do a Yarn build. So this is taking my Gatsby site, and I go in and just run Yarn build, and it will like it'll create a public folder that has all the build artifacts for me. And then I come in and say, let's actually come in and deploy the site. So I add some more environment variables, and I will come in and then run Netlify CLI's deploy commands, which basically I say, here's the folder I want you to push up, and it will actually push up those assets up into Netlify. And at the end of this, I have two triggers that look very similar, but will back. So if I say if the build succeeded, which you can actually figure out using these success and failure functions. So you can actually conditionally run a step itself. So I can say maybe if this previous step succeeded, or if any of these failed, I can go in and say run this one or run this one. So if this one succeeds, then this one won't run. So on top of that, so I come in and I wrote myself a action that I open source called LifeX trigger action, which basically you pass in the two fields I had up here. So the LifeX token, which is an authentication token, and LifeX bulb ID, which is a selector that defines what light bulbs do you want to turn on. Do you want to turn on, or do you want to trigger one? Do you want to trigger multiple? You can choose with that. And then I can pass in that color with the with command. So like again, passing in a parameter, and it'll. So if all this build succeeds, my light will go green, and then I can know, hey, my site's live. And if it fails, I can know, hey, something went wrong. I'm currently just doing this, like triggering that light, but maybe I could also take those logs and pass them into a dashboard, or maybe I could send them into a Slack channel or a Discord. I can really do whatever I want with these assets to get the information that I want to see into my hands, or into the person that it belongs his hands. So that's a live running workflow that I've been using for, I'd say, for the past like 6 months. And the nice thing is it's written and it just works. I don't have to tweak in it. I don't have to do anything. And specifically, because if you look at all these uses fields, since I'm adding the @ symbol and then a particular either branch or tag, I can know that this code will never change because I tagged this version. I'm saying like only use 1.0.0. So I'll know that this will never change in the future until I actually update this to maybe 1.0.1 or 1.1.0 or 2.0. So on top of that, as I was saying earlier, there's some other features that are also very useful in GitHub Actions. So I could, for instance, cache dependencies. So when I went back here, when I ran yarn here, I would say all the node modules, for intensive purposes, as long as my yarn lock file, the thing that says these are the versions of all these dependencies that you're using, if that doesn't change, then I don't need to reinstall all of these things. I can just pull it down from a cache. So they actually do allow you to cache dependencies for later runs, which is extremely handy if you want to kind of save various things. You can save artifacts for later. So for instance, if we were building some site, like if we were building a site and then maybe we took some snapshots with Puppeteer, those screenshots, we could actually save, and someone could download a zip file that has all those screenshots and be able to view them. So they can take stuff from GitHub Actions and actually pull it out and like download it onto your local machine. And on top of that, maybe you want something that's even like bigger, more full-fledged for like if you're doing integration testing. So since I was saying, like, since you have the ability to use Docker containers, you can actually orchestrate them similarly you would do with like something like Docker Compose. You say, here are all the various different services I have. I want to spin up a Redis service, or maybe another database. If I want to spin up like any kind of service you want that you can spin up with a Docker container, it will all live in a virtual network that can be accessible from either the VM itself or any containers that you write. So it does it offers quite the complexity, I would say, with all these various different features. So with that, for just any like remaining resources, GitHub has a lot of good docs on this. So they have a flash for like how to do this, like the syntax specifically for all this. They have a lot of stuff there. Sarah Drasner, she works at Netlify. She wrote she built out a repository where people can like post their actions, like for really, I think there's like really like about 100 200 like actions. There's a lot of actions that you can go in here. And if I actually open this up, you can see that if I zoom this in, there's actions for any, there's a huge amount of resources. There's actions, like you can just keep on going down. So there's really a huge amount of resources that are here. And finally, I actually, as I was kind of going through this, myself, I've felt like I wanted to have a resource that like I kind of pushed out. And I built a thing called GARS, which is funny because like when I started this, I wanted to create a resource site for GitHub Actions. And I was like, okay, GitHub Actions resource site. And then I was like, okay, but what's an actual name for this site? And that was the actual name for the site. So again, I have some stuff here where you have various pages. So I have some pages, but I don't have a huge amount, but like I have resources about various things. So like as I was talking about webhooks section earlier, I have a very simple page where you can kind of learn how to use webhooks. If you want to write actions with Docker, you can go here. If you want to write an action with JavaScript, you can go here. And as well, I have a page where I actually have listing of all of the various things from GitHub's changelog about GitHub Actions, all being generated using GitHub Actions. So I don't need to go in and every time a new thing about GitHub Actions is pushed out to GitHub's changelog, I don't need to go and grab that URL and post it here. I have an action that just automatically does this and will be able to update this for me. So I go back. So otherwise, that's all. So I hope you got a kind of good, at least a introduction into GitHub Actions and a kind of the idea, and try to get ideas that, you know, you don't have to go huge and like lavagant with like all the various like workflows and actions you can do. I would say just start with simple things, like, and you can just build up over time to create very powerful and unique workflows for specifically your actions. So thank you.
All right, Ben, thank you so much. That was rad. I know we had some super excitement in the chat. I've got about 4 questions for you. Yep. So first was from Zach Davis. Are these available in GitHub Enterprise?
Yeah, so I am actually not sure personally. So I know they I think I saw one thing, and did someone also bring up the thing about it's not available being for legacy accounts? But yep, thank you. But so it is available currently for all like public repos, anything there. I'm not sure about enterprise. I think they were saying it was like it didn't launch at launch. I'm not sure if they've gotten to it yet, but it's something that they are planning on adding which actually, if I go, actually, I'm betting they do have it, because if I go back to, if you go up to GitHub's page, features, actions, they have like a kind of a splash page for it. And if you go down to the bottom, they do have a listing for enterprise. This is kind of their pricing tiers. So for public repos, it's completely free. It will always be free. But for private repositories, these are the various amount of minutes you get per month. And then this is kind of how much they cost for each operating system after you go through these caps. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Two from Ryan Harris. First one, does your package work with any LifeX device?
Yeah, so it is just using LifeX's like, as long as it is accessible through their HTTP API, you can access it. So for instance, like behind me, I have just a normal bulb. Well, in front of me, behind the camera, there's a normal bulb. Over like behind me, up behind my shoulder, I actually have a tile, so I can access that. Really, any for that action, you just have to pass in like the selector that you can give it. Like you can get a name, but you also can get an ID. You can do it based upon a group. So really, as long as you have access to, like as long as it's online and accessible from the internet, it's possible to be interacted with.
Okay, dope. He's excited. He has LifeX strips in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then he was also wondering, like you're doing from the branch, can you run an action based on a specific file changing?
So you cannot filter down all the way down to a certain, like in as I was showing previously, here, like under a specific trigger, you can have various filters. You cannot currently do it based upon like a file change, but you could actually come in and write an action that says, hey, if this file's been changed, um like you can actually say, like, if this file's been changed, continue on. Otherwise, stop right here and not cancel, but just like pause and like neutrally continue with it, like neutrally stop. So maybe you're working with something and where you only want to do something based upon if a markdown file changed instead of like anything else. With that, you could write this simple action to kind of filter out and take a pause. And if it did change, continue on. Otherwise, pause but not fail. If that makes sense.
Hopefully he got all that, Ryan Harris. Can't just be, oh, there he is. Cool. I wanted to hit an endpoint when the streamers list in the party core repo changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And then our last question was from Angel Young. She asked, "What do you suggest to GitHub beginners who want to up their GitHub game in awesome ways like this?"
Yeah, so I'd say it's awesome. Like I would say for someone who's new, really just to explore what people have. So like for instance, if I go back to that listing from Sarah Drasner, really just kind of I'd say explore and see what's available. So like maybe scroll through here. So like a lot of these things are like for setting things up, but something that maybe would be interesting to go through is like just kind of view what's available. So just kind of seeing some fun ones. So maybe whenever someone like pushes a PR, maybe you want to hook up something to like Slack. So someone wrote this like action to do it without, like, you don't need to write any code. You just need to pass in the various data that you want. Maybe you want to come in here and you looks like there's ones for like deploying various code. Like kind of look through there. Maybe you want to do some stuff with AWS. Maybe you want to do stuff. Actually, I know Robert Tables is in the chat, and there's one for like maybe you want to have GitHub Actions like load up a certain environment for your if you're doing some stuff with AWS, maybe you want to learn and load up a certain profile. So you pass in a access key and a access key a secret. Using this action, that's all you need to do. So really, I would say just kind of like this is a very good resource. Just kind of go and explore. One final one that actually last one that's you can also look in is if you go to the marketplace and you click on actions, there is a listing. There is a bunch of them here as well. What I recommend and be careful with is some of these actions are using there was a version before the it stabilized that they were using a different syntax for it. So like if I come in here, let me see if I can find one. Let's see. Yeah, so like this was a different this one has a different syntax up here. So they haven't like kind of filter out of like what ones can you just pull in immediately, or what ones are you gonna maybe have to tweak or have to rewrite. If that makes sense.
Well, dope. Thank you, Ben. I think that's all the questions we had in the chat. Angel said thank you. Dude, thank you so much for coming on and being our first like fully remote guest. You were dope. You were awesome, man.
You're welcome.